Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are doing something unique. This is not something that we have done on the podcast before, but I'm super excited. This is going to be our first round mock draft for the NFL Draft 2025. You know, nobody watches more college football than us here at Mike's Money Picks, and we've also been doing a lot of NFL draft content over at drroto.com, so make sure you go check that out. But here in this episode, we are going to give our first round mock. This is going to be how we think the first round of the NFL Draft should unfold, and while we're doing that, we're going to break down every selection, and we're going to go over some prop bets and some different stuff that you can look at. So that way, if you're looking to make some money off of this NFL draft, you can do so. And if you play fantasy, we're going to talk about fantasy implications as well. But this is a super unique NFL draft. All 32 teams have their first round picks. So we've got 32 selections right now, 32 teams to talk about, 32 situations to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so with the first selection of the 2025 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans are going to select Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. Look, I think this one's a very obvious one. Tennessee needs a quarterback. They want a quarterback. Offensive-minded head coach and Brian Callahan wants to get his guy. You know, Callahan made it very clear last year that Will Levis is not his guy, and he's going to get his guy in Cam Ward. To me, this is a draft very reminiscent of 2018, where Baker Mayfield was not the number one overall prospect, but the team that was drafting number one, the Cleveland Browns, very much so needed a quarterback, and the number one quarterback was Baker Mayfield, so the number one pick was Baker Mayfield. Very much similar situation here, where Cam Ward's probably not the number one overall prospect, but by all indications, he is going to be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. And number two is going to be Travis Hunter to the Cleveland Browns. Now, this is an interesting one. So first off, if you're looking to do any kind of prop bets for the draft, make sure that whatever sports book that you're using is make sure that they understand what they're doing with Travis Hunter, right? So the DraftKings has already declared that Travis Hunter is going to be graded as a cornerback. Other sports books might be doing differently, but if you're doing any kind of prop bets on like first guy selected, first position selected, whatever, that is something to know. Now, by all indications, to me, it seems like Cleveland is locked in on taking Travis Hunter. Is that what I would do if I was the Browns GM? Honestly, no. Honestly, I would be taking Abdul Carter if I was the Cleveland Browns. I think that if you're looking at the Browns, Travis Hunter would probably not come in as their number one receiver, would probably not come in as their number one cornerback. However, his ability to do both makes him just an exceptional, unique unicorn of a prospect. Now, I will say this, though. There's some slight red flags to me with Travis Hunter. When you look at what he did as a receiver at Colorado, it was a lot of screens. It was a lot of stop routes. It was a lot of hitch routes, curl routes that didn't involve him running a whole lot deep down the field because they knew that they needed to play him north of 100 snaps a game. In the NFL, I don't think that's sustainable. I think the defensive coordinators are going to lock onto that, and they're going to understand, hey, this guy right here is not going deep. So we're going to, get up on him, get, pressure him at the line of scrimmage, make him work, make him earn his yards, and, kind of just eliminate the short passing game from his arsenal, right? And I think the cornerback position in the NFL is a position where you have to be all in at. There's so many route combinations in the NFL that in so many different coverages, with teams running different ways of running match coverage, different ways of running zone coverage, that you just need to see every route every week if you're going to play cornerback at the full-time level. So what I think you're likely to see out of Travis Hunter is, in my opinion, he should come in and he should be a full-time cornerback and a package play receiver, because it would be very easy for him at the wide receiver position to come in and just play him 15 to 20 snaps a game and say, hey, Travis, we need you to run this. Travis, we need you to run this. Like, just, they can pretty much give him the route almost in the huddle if they want him to be a package player wide receiver. Whereas corner, I think you really need the reps every single day at practice if you want to have a full understanding and a full grasp of the position. All right, now number three, by all indications, it is going to be the New York Giants taking Abdul Carter, defensive end out of Penn State. Look, I think this one is another one where I think that the Browns and the Giants should honestly be switching places if we're being honest with ourselves. I think Hunter would be a much better fit in New York, and I think Carter would be a much better fit in Cleveland to pair with Myles Garrett. But Abdul Carter, to me, in elite prospect. Like, if you're the Giants and you're sitting there at 3, you simply cannot pass on Abdul Carter. Last year he had 13 sacks at Penn State, and that was really the first time his whole career that they had asked him to just purely be an edge rush player, and he was that productive in his first season. When I watch Abdul Carter play, I see Von Miller, and to me, that's just the best comparison. He's an insanely athletic guy with a motor that does not stop. And one thing that is really, really vital for a pass rusher He has really good bend at the hips. Now, I coached high school football for 7 years. I now coach girls flag football and love it, by the way. But I coached defensive line for 5 years, right? And one thing that makes defensive linemen much better pass rushers is their ability to bend their hips and be flexible at that part of their body, because it allows you to get by offensive linemen in different ways. I had an edge rusher that was really, really good, and he was a big time recruit in college, and he didn't have great hip bend. Even though he put up 15 plus sacks for me in high school, he didn't have great hip bend. And so they moved him inside to 3 technique because they decided it was easier for him to put on 30 pounds than it was for him to get this natural hip bend that you want in your edge rushers. So Abdul Carter, because he has that, is a guy that I think is going to be an elite edge rusher for the entirety of his career. I know the Giants already have Brian Burns. I know they already had Kayvon Thibodeau, but it just makes so much sense for them to just take the best player on the board and figure out what to do with it later, because I do think that this draft goes significantly downward after Hunter and Carter. So those first 3 picks really seem like they're locked in at this point. And to me, pick number 4 is where the draft is going to start. This is a very natural trade spot to me, because what I think is going to end up happening is New England, honestly, the guy that fits their team the best is Travis Hunter, but I don't see them trading up to 2 to get him from Cleveland. I think New England is very much content to sit here at 4, or they're content to, open up shop and see what teams will trade for them. Now, who might trade for them? Well, I think that the most likely trade candidate would be somebody coming up to take Ashton Jeanty. So I really do, if I'm being honest with myself, I think that a really good prop bet is Ashton Jeanty to go number 4 or number 5 overall, because I do think that there's a chance that somebody is going to trade up to get past Oakland if they want to take Ashton Jeanty, or Oakland, if they really want to secure Jeanty, could actually trade up to 4 or 5 to get him. Now, with this being what it is, and just trades being all speculative, I'm going to draft as if I'm the New England Patriots right here. What's really interesting to me, though, about this pick is everybody assumes that it's going to be Will Campbell if they go with an offensive lineman. I actually think that, and I'm going to predict right here, I'm going to have Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas going to New England. What I really like about Kelvin Banks, this is a guy who came in the second he set foot on campus in Austin, he was starting at left tackle. That is really, really hard to do in any Power 5 program, but especially one that's really, really good, right? Like Texas, the 3 years that he's been there, it has been really good every single time, making the playoffs in 2023 and 2024. Kelvin Banks Jr. brings a lot of power in the run game. He's also a versatile enough player that I think you can draft him, and if you want to move him to guard, I think he would be more than happy to do so, and I think he has the physical ability to do so. But I think he's just kind of a more versatile player than what you have in Will Campbell. And that's not a knock on Will Campbell, but I really do think that that's a really natural spot for Kelvin Banks. So pick number 5 for Jacksonville. This is where the draft is going to get real interesting. So personally, and I think there's a lot of people in the industry that feel this way, the draft is really flat after Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And what I mean by that is there's not a big gap in talent level between the 3rd player on everybody's board and like the 20th player on everybody's board. And so everybody seems to think that that's going to mean that there's going to be less trades, because teams are just going to sit back and be content to hope that their guy falls to them. I actually think it's going to be the opposite, because I think if I'm sitting later on in the first round and I really want a guy, why would I not throw in a cheap price to try to move up? And, hopefully a team that's sitting there drafting is like, we could get our guy at a few picks back. So I think it's going to make negotiations easier. I think the prices are going to be lowered for trades. And so I think that you're going to see a lot of them. And a pick number 5 is one like number 4 that I could very well see somebody, moving up to 5 to get in front of Las Vegas, because I do think that that is a very pivotal spot in the draft, is that Las Vegas pick, right? So for the Jacksonville Jaguars, on the clock at pick number 5, it seems to me that a lot of their needs, they would probably want to trade back down. But the logical pick, if they're staying here, would be Mason Graham out of Michigan. We're talking about just a truly dominant defensive tackle in his days at Michigan. The Jacksonville Jaguars have a new front office, new coaching staff, and their new front office has very much pounded the table for, we need to build through the trenches. We need to make sure we're right on the lines, because if we're being honest, offensively, if you can keep Trevor Lawrence, Trevor Etienne, and Brian Thomas Jr. healthy, that's a pretty solid big 3 starting point in the skill spots. And if they can start building through the lines on both sides, they can really help themselves out and keep those guys healthy and productive. Mason Graham's the same concept on defense. They have some good solid players in the secondary and linebacking core, and having a guy like Mason Graham, can kind of keep attention off of those guys, and it makes a lot of sense for him to go pick number 5 there to Jacksonville. So pick number 6, we've got the Oakland Raiders taking. And honestly, this one just makes too much sense. I'm going to have the loss. I'm sorry, did I say Oakland Raiders? I may have. I constantly make that mistake. Anyway, I'm going to have the Las Vegas Raiders taking it. Pick number 6, Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. Look, this one is just too obvious. Jeanty is, in my opinion, one of the best running backs to come through the draft in the last decade. Like, there have been 3 can't miss stud. Yeah, that guy's going to be like a Pro Bowl caliber player running back coming into the draft in the last 8 years. It's been Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Ashton Jeanty. They're all 3 about the same level as a prospect. Jeanty going pick number 6 should not surprise anybody. And Oakland is a great fit as a team that needs a running back. And I just can't say enough about how good Jeanty was at Boise State, how much of a great tackle breaker he was. I believe he had over 1,500 yards after contact last year, which is just an insane statistic. And so, Vegas, you've got Brock Bowers, you've got Pete Carroll coming in. You've got to build an offensive identity. And what better way to do it than getting a guy like Jeanty that, can really just add some pop to this offense. All right, we're going to take a quick breather, and then we're going to continue on with the next group of picks. All right, so let's recap it real quick. Number 1, Tennessee Titans taking Cam Ward, quarterback of Miami. Number 2, Travis Hunter, cornerback of Colorado, going to Cleveland. Number 3, the Giants took edge Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Pick number 4, the Patriots took offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Pick number 5, Jaguars take Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Pick number 6, Las Vegas Raiders took Ashton Jeanty, halfback out of Boise State. So now we got pick number 7, and y'all, I'm going to be honest here. There's way too much consensus in mock drafts for what this class looks like. And what I mean by that is this. Pretty much there's a lot of mock drafts that have very similar to the first 6 picks that I've seen. And there's a lot of consensus on some later picks as well. But like I said, this draft class is really flat. You're going to have a lot of teams that they're going to have guys ranked on the board very similarly, and who they pick is going to be based off of who falls to them, and it might be differently from who everybody projects. So I'm going to kind of go slightly out of the box here. For the New York Jets on the clock at pick number 7, I'm going to have them taking, whoops, I did not mean to click that. I'm going to have them taking Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. Basically, what we're looking at with Tyler Warren, this is just an elite offensive weapon. He was used all over the field at Penn State. He was great route runner, great after the catch. They would use him as a wildcat quarterback. This is just a guy who makes plays all over the field. And with the Jets, we know they have a solid defense. We know they have Breece Hall in the run game. Why would they not try to add a weapon in the pass game to help Justin Fields out a little bit? Tyler Warren makes a lot of sense. They're going off the board at number 7. Pick number 8, this is my team. This is Carolina Panthers. And I think this is a very easy selection, personally. I am going with Jalen Walker out of Georgia. So this is a guy that Georgia moved all over the defense. He's a guy that can play on the edge. He can play, at a regular off-the-ball linebacker position. And he can do everything. He can rush the passer. He can stop the run. He can drop into pass coverage as well. The Panthers were the worst rush defense in the league last year. And by getting a guy like Jalen Walker, they get a piece that they can move all over the defense and can do everything you ask him to. And it just makes so much sense for them to be taking Walker there at number 8. Now, I will say this. There's 2 guys that it wouldn't shock me if the Panthers end up with. If somehow Mason Graham falls to 8, I think that makes a lot of sense, but just a defensive tackle that can plug that porous run defense that they had. And then also, I think that Tetairoa McMillan is in play for the Panthers at number 8. Tetairoa McMillan, the best receiver in this class, not named Travis Hunter. And where he goes is going to be really interesting. I think that the Panthers are a sneaky play to get Tetairoa McMillan there at number 8. Now we are on the New Orleans Saints picking at pick number 9. And this is one where you've seen some people have Shedeur Sanders going to the Saints, but I actually don't think that that's the biggest concern for them right now. I think that they've got a really old, really aging roster, and they need to get good fast. And so what I actually am going to have them doing here with Kelvin Banks Jr. going to the Patriots, I'm going to have Will Campbell going to the New Orleans Saints. LSU guy staying in Louisiana, really going to shore up that offensive line for the New Orleans Saints. And I think that he's a guy that could, be a multi-year starter for them, just an anchor on the offensive line and be super solid, super consistent, right? Now, that really does hurt the Bears because I think that would have been a very logical, very sensible pick for the Chicago Bears here at pick number 10, because the Chicago Bears are a team that does need offensive line help, in my opinion. Now, they're also a team that would not turn down help off the edge. Like, I think that that's a position they could target as well. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have another offensive lineman going. I'm going to have Armand Membu of Missouri going to the Chicago Bears. That a team that right now they have to generate a run game and they have to protect Caleb Williams. And one way you could check off both of those boxes is by taking an offensive tackle like Membu here at pick number 10, which leads to a very logical pick at number 11 for me with the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to have the 49ers taking Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. So the 49ers really do need some help at that defensive tackle position. It's been one that they've kind of neglected. Walter Nolan, former #1 overall recruit coming out of high school, super talented player, can play either inside or like a 3 technique or a 4-eye on the defensive line. So he's a guy that you can move around a little bit. Really good athlete, really going to help them on defense, which is an area that they kind of fell apart because of injuries last year. Now, pick number 12, we got the Dallas Cowboys. And y'all, Jerry Jones in the NFL draft loves to make a splash, right? No one loves to make a splash more than Jerry Jones on draft night. So would it shock me if Jerry traded up to get Ashton Jeanty? No. Would it traded up if Jerry traded up to even get the guy that I'm about to say? No. But I think this is a guy that the Cowboys can take, and it would make a splash. It would have an impact, and it would make people be talking about the Dallas Cowboys. I have Dallas taking Tetairoa McMillan, the receiver out of Arizona. Ted McMillan, basically just a really, really smooth athlete to be as big as he is, because he's 6'4", 6'5". He's really big. He moves really well, and he's got tremendous ball skills at the wide receiver position. He really attacks the football, and he makes a lot of contested catches, and he's pretty solid after the catch as well. His straight line speed is not all that great. There have been questions about how much he loves football, but let's be honest, the receiver position is kind of like known for being like the divas and not the hardest workers anyway. So is that really that much of a concern? I don't really think it is. And I think that pick number 12 to Dallas is a really natural landing spot. You get a great pairing partner with CeeDee Lamb, where Lamb can take the top off a defense and Tetairoa McMillan can operate in the intermediate area of the field, which is what he excels at the most. Now, the Miami Dolphins here at pick number 13. I think this is a really easy selection. I've got them going Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. If Barron falls to the Dolphins, I think he is a absolute home run of a selection for them. He's a guy that can play both inside and outside cornerback. The Dolphins simply cannot go into the NFL season with their current secondary. They just can't. So getting a guy like Barron here just makes a lot of sense here, pick 13. And then pick number 14, we got the Indianapolis Colts. This is another one that I think just makes too much sense. I've got the Colts taking Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. The Colts for years have just not had a game breaker at the tight end position ever since the days of Dallas Clark, right? And so now they're able to get that. Loveland just looks like if you could go into a lab and build a perfect tight end, it would look like Colston Loveland. He's a solid blocker. He's a really good route runner and really good target earner. He was basically the wide receiver 1 for this Michigan team in 2022 and 2023. And oh, by the way, or really in 2023 more so than 2022. Really, and that's a national championship caliber team. Like, they won the national championship in 2023, and he was basically their #1 wide receiver. So I really do like Colston Loveland. He continued pretty much to be their wide receiver 1 last year. He's a guy that can come in Indy, and whoever they play at quarterback, Richardson or Daniel Jones, can find a new best friend in Colston Loveland. Now at pick number 15, we have got the Atlanta Falcons on the board. So this is a team that I think they would probably not turn down offensive line help, but I think it makes so much sense for them to draft an edge player. They really got to generate a pass rush. That's just one area they really struggled at last season. And so I'm going to have them taking Mike Green, defensive end out of Marshall. So one thing I like about Mike Green, when you watch him play, and I obviously didn't watch Marshall every single week, but like there were times where they were on my TV, right? He jumps off the screen because he has a bag of pass rush moves. Like, he has initial moves, he has counters, whatever the offensive lineman is going to try to do, he's going to have a solution for it. And even though he played in the Sun Belt at Marshall, I do think that ability to come up with different amount of moves is going to translate well to the NFL, and offensive linemen are going to struggle to kind of have an answer for everything he's going to bring in his arsenal. And so I do think the pick 15, Mike Green out of Marshall, really solid selection there to the Atlanta Falcons. Pick number 16, we've got the Arizona Cardinals on the clock. Now, this is an interesting one because they've got a lot of needs. Like, I'm surprised they're honestly picking this late in the draft, because it just seems like they have so much other needs, right? Like, it just really seems like there's a lot of guys that can make a lot of sense here. Now, I do think that they can address the wide receiver position later on in the draft. So that's not necessarily a position that I think I'm going to go with here for the Arizona Cardinals, but there's just a ton of options for who you can go with. Pro Football Focus on here, it says their needs are guard, defensive lineman, and cornerback. I would agree the most probably there on just defensive back in general. So I'm going to have Will Johnson of the Michigan Wolverines going here to Arizona. Interestingly enough, I did have Jahdae Barron going over Will Johnson in my mock. That's something that I do think will happen. Will Johnson did not have a great last season at Michigan. He was dealing with a turf toe injury. He just did not play the same level that he had in 2023. I think teams are going to knock him for that, especially considering that he did not run at the combine or at his pro day to kind of quell any of those concerns. And whereas Jahdae Barron just looked great at the combine and at the pro day. So I do think that is going to knock Will Johnson a little bit. And I have him as the third cornerback selected, as long as Travis Hunter is considered a cornerback. They're at pick number 16. All right, so let's recap those last picks. So pick number 7, the Jets taking tight end Tyler Warren out of Penn State. Number 8, the Panthers taking linebacker Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Number 9, the Saints taking Will Campbell, tackle out of LSU. Number 10, Bears taking Armand Membu, tackle out of Missouri. Number 11, 49ers taking Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Number 12, Cowboys taking Tedero McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Number 13, Dolphins taking Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. 14, Colts taking Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. 15, Falcons taking Mike Green, edge out of Marshall. And 16, Arizona taking Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. Let's take a quick break and then let's get on with the second half of the draft. All right, so kicking things off in the second half is the Cincinnati Bengals on the clock here at pick number 17. And I got to be honest, y'all, when you look at what the Bengals did last year, they were an elite offense with an absolutely porous defense. And in the offseason, they signed their 2 top receivers, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, to long-term contracts. If they do not invest in some defenders in this draft, then that to me indicates that they are just an unserious franchise and not looking to actually win football games. They simply put have to invest in the defensive side of football. They have to. Like they just have to get better on defense. To me, if they're taking anybody on the offensive side of the football, you get one offensive lineman in this draft, Cincinnati. One. Everybody else needs to be on defense. And so to me, a great way that they could do that here at pick number 17, I have this guy falling to them. I'm not saying for certain he will. I've got Mykel Williams, edge out of Georgia. He is going to be the guy that I have mocked to the Cincinnati Bengals. Some people have Mykel Williams going ahead of Mike Green. Some of them have him going ahead of Jalen Walker and Walter Nolan. But to me, this is a good spot for Mykel Williams. He's a guy who has one heck of a highlight tape, but just didn't do a whole lot consistently. But if you're thinking about what the Bengals need, they can get a pass rusher to pair with Trey Hendrickson or eventually be Trey Hendrickson's successor because, they probably don't have the money to lock him up long term. And he's a guy that could come in and, if they plan on being up in a lot of these games, then he's a guy that can come in and rush the passer. And he's really good at that. And so I do think this is a really natural spot for Mykel Williams here at the Bengals at pick number 17. Now for number 18 for the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team that has 3 needs. They need offensive linemen. They need pass rush help. And they need a wide receiver. And I got to be honest, I think that a wide receiver and offensive lineman will be there later on in the draft for them. And so I'm going to have them going ahead and getting a pass rusher here. I'm going to have them taking Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. So this is not my personally favorite pick because he just wasn't all that productive in college. He only has 4.5 sacks in the total of his college career. It's not good, y'all. It's not good. But this is a guy who routinely would get pressures on the quarterback and just did not finish off plays. And if you're getting pressures, then and you get a coach that's going to build you up and get you in the right system, get you in the right culture, then maybe he can start finishing those plays and start putting up some stats on the field. But to me, he's a guy who has all the physical tools you would want, but just left you with wanting a lot more in college. And so it does have me kind of concerned about him. But I do think the pick 18 there at Seattle, I think that's a spot where it could be a good fit for him and a spot where he could go and produce. And they certainly need help at pass rusher. Now, this is the one that I've been pretty confident about at pick number 19 for a long time. I have Tampa taking linebacker Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. So Jahad Campbell does have some injury concerns, but when he's healthy, which he was during the college football season, this is an elite off-the-ball linebacker who can cover, who can blitz, who can stuff the run. He can do it all, and he's really smart and has really good reaction time. And to me, he's like the perfect successor for Lavonte David, where he can kind of come in and be Lavonte David's partner for a few years and then end up being his successor years after, right? You kind of saw the Carolina Panthers do this a while back with drafting Shaq Thompson while Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis were still there, where, he comes in, he's the third guy in the 4-3, but then Davis retires and now he's the guy next to Kuechly. Kuechly retires, now he's the guy, right? Like this is a perfect spot for the Buccaneers to do that, where he can kind of learn all the tricks of the trade from Lavonte David, who's been nothing but a consummate professional his entire career, and then Jahad Campbell can carry on that legacy. I think that's a great pick if he is able to go there to Tampa. Do not be surprised to see him fall further than that, though, because teams might be spooked by the injury concerns, but I'm not. I think that this is a really good spot for him there at Tampa Bay. Pick number 20, I also think this is a match made in heaven. The Broncos desperately need a running back. And to this point in the draft, I still have my second running back, Omarion Hampton, on the board. And so he is going to be going to the Denver Broncos. I think that they very much cannot go into the season with their starting running back room looking like what it looks like right now. And so they're going to want to get a guy in this draft at some point. And I think Omarion Hampton makes a lot of sense. This is a guy who, in his time at Carolina, really expanded his game as a pass catcher in the last 2 seasons. So he can play all 3 downs. He wasn't necessarily a great pass blocker, but he's a guy that when he runs with a lot of power. He's a great goal line rusher. He's a great red zone rusher. He's a great short yardage rusher, and he has the speed to create breakaway explosive runs as well. Cannot emphasize enough how much I like Omarion Hampton as a running back, and I think that's a great fit in Denver for a team that has a lot of pieces in place to go back to the playoffs again. The running back is a very clear need, and they can get him here at pick 20. They can address their other needs in the later rounds. Speaking of needs, Pittsburgh Steelers need a quarterback. And, obviously, if you're watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday and they've signed Aaron Rodgers, well, obviously that will be out the window, right? But as it stands right now, they need a quarterback. And still on the board, I have not had my second quarterback get selected, and that is Shedeur Sanders coming out of Colorado. So I'm going to have him going here to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that's a really good fit. So I think when you look at Shedeur, there's a very clear reason why he's going to probably fall in this draft, and it's that he's just not the best overall prospect, right? He's not the biggest. He's not the fastest. He doesn't have a cannon of an arm. He's not going to wow anybody with throw velocity or different arm angles and stuff like that, like Matthew Stafford and Patrick Mahomes, but he's a playmaker. He's just a guy that when he's there in the pocket, he's going to make something happen. He understands where to go with the football. He understands where the chains are all the time. And when he was at Colorado, he just was a guy that you just could not get off the field because he had a knack for, creating 3rd and 4th down conversions. Now, granted, the detractors would say he holds on to the ball too long. I get it. The detractors would say he takes a lot of sacks. I would counterpoint that, he did not have very much of a good offensive line at Colorado. And so, yeah, you're going to get sacked when you're not behind a good offensive line. But I think Shedeur is just a playmaker. I think he's a good fit for the Steelers for what they have right now. Whereas, hey, we've got one of the best defenses in the league. We need a guy on the offensive side of the football who can come in and just make some things happen and give us some points in some of these close games that we're going to be in. And Shedeur Sanders is that guy. And I think there at pick 21 is a great fit for him. Now, pick number 22, we've got the Los Angeles Chargers on the board. And y'all, I got to say, this is a team that very naturally could use some of the guys that were taken in the last 6 or 7 picks. I think that Jahdae Barron would make a lot of sense. Colston Loveland and Will Johnson getting reunited with Jim Harbaugh would make a lot of sense. One of the edge guys like Mykel Williams would make a lot of sense. Omarion Hampton at running back would make a lot of sense, right? But for what they have right now, the Los Angeles Chargers, they really need a game-breaking receiver. And if Tetairoa McMillan were to fall to them, I think that would be the type of guy that they would need. But they don't have that luxury. They're sitting here at pick 22, Tetairoa McMillan I had going to Dallas, right? So what receiver do I have going to Los Angeles? Well, the one guy in this draft that's available at the top that could take the top off a defense is Matthew Golden out of Texas. He was the fastest receiver out of anybody at the combine. He really expanded his game in 2024 to turn into Texas's alpha wide receiver. And this is a guy that I think you can put on the outside there in Los Angeles. And he's a guy that can take the top off and open things up for Justin Herbert and the rest of the offense. And I think that is a really, really solid selection there with the Chargers taking Matthew Golden there. Now, the one guy I will say, it would not shock me if they went Emeka Egbuka instead of Matthew Golden. Emeka Egbuka is like a coach's dream of a wide receiver, right? Because he's going to go in, he's going to block, he's going to play whatever role you ask him to. He does not have a big ego. That to me very much strikes me as a Harbaugh kind of guy. But I think for X's and O's schematically, what their offense needs, I think they really need a Matthew Golden type there to really stretch the field and open things up for Herbert and the rest of the offense. Now, pick number 23, we've got the Green Bay Packers taken. And look, I got to be honest, this is a very natural spot for them to be either drafting a edge or a cornerback. Like to me, those are very clearly their two needs. I don't think they need a receiver. There's a lot of mocks I've seen that have them taking a receiver. I just don't agree with that. Like, they've got a young core of receivers and guys that can produce. They need help on the defensive side of the football, right? And so one guy I think that could give them that help is I have got them here going with Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. Ezeraku was one of the best sack artists in all of college football last year at Boston College. Very productive player, is going to come in and be very productive here at Green Bay. I really do like the fit there. He's a guy that could really help that pass rush. And pick 23, Green Bay getting Donovan Ezeraku. I think that will be a home run selection if they were able to get him to fall there. Now, Minnesota, we've got here pick 24. Minnesota, to me, really needs help in the defensive backfield. They really do, right? Now, we've already gotten Will Johnson off the board. We've already gotten Jahdae Barron off the board. So there's a lot of different options at corner, and there's not really consensus on who the next one is. To me, the guy that really just feels like a Minnesota type of pick is Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. This is a guy who is a super fast player at the cornerback position, like just insane speed for days. And he's a guy that could come in and just really like be a deep pass preventer. And they're going to play a lot of cover 3 and cover 4 in Minnesota. And he's a guy that could come in and just say like, hey, you're not getting behind me. I've got speed. I've got ability to track down these deep passes. I think he really fits what they do there. And so pick number 24, Maxwell Hairston going to the Minnesota Vikings. Pick number 25, we got Houston. So Houston's interesting because they traded away all their offensive linemen. And then they have Tank Dell, who's hurt. And so it's like they're a good offense, but it's like they need offensive players. It's a really weird predicament that they find themselves in. But if we end up here at this spot in the draft, I really think that there's two offensive linemen that make a lot of sense to go to Houston. It's Josh Simmons out of Ohio State and Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. I'm going to have them taking Josh Simmons kind of as the long-term Laramie Tunsil replacement. Gray Zabel is very much like a utility offensive lineman. He can play pretty much anywhere on the offensive line. So I really do think that, a team that needs more like a guard or help on the inside could go with Gray Zabel. Whereas a team like Houston that probably needs help at offensive tackle would probably prefer to have a true tackle, and Josh Simmons out of Ohio State could provide that. Now, pick 26, we've got the Los Angeles Rams here on the clock. Now, this could get interesting because I got to be honest, if we get to this point in the draft and he's still on the board, I could kind of see the Rams taking a quarterback. I really could. I could also see them taking, if he was still on the board, Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama, who we had going to Tampa Bay. This is a pick that could go any which way because the Rams have a few different needs, but none of them are like super pressing, if we're being honest. If I'm the Rams and I'm drafting here, one thing I do think they could do is I do think they could shore up their offensive line, which is a position that really got hammered last year with injuries, and they could get Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. Just a guy that could give you, ultimate fill-in guy, could fill in at one or two different spots. If you have injuries, you can move them around. Like their season fell apart 2 years ago when their offensive line got hurt. And if their offensive line stays healthy this year, they're probably going to be pretty good. And Zabel's a guy that could come in and fill multiple spots on that offensive line. All right, so now for the Baltimore Ravens, picking here at pick 27. With how this draft has shaken out, I actually find this to be a very easy selection. I've got them taking Tyler Booker out of Alabama. The Ravens are a team that pretty much their one need is they could use more pass rush help, but they could also use an interior offensive lineman. Tyler Booker, best guard in the draft. I think he's a future Pro Bowler at the position. I think that's a very good value selection for the Ravens there at pick number 27. Now, pick number 28, we've got the Detroit Lions. Now, I think they could really use a pass rusher. And you know who's a really good pass rusher that's available that I think fits what they do? I think it is Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. Nick Scorton was the more productive player between him and Shamar Stewart. And he was a guy that also got a lot of attention. He was a very, very good player at Purdue before he transferred to Texas A&M, and teams knew that. And so they sent him all the double teams. They sent him all the tight ends, the chip and pass pro, the running back to help and pass pro. Like he got all the attention. He was still able to produce, still had more sacks than Shamar Stewart. And so I really like Nick Scorton. I think he's a guy that's going to produce at the NFL level. Very much to me, it feels like a Dan Campbell selection where, we're getting a productive physical offensive lineman And this is a guy that can come in and help us on that offensive line, right? Now, pick number 29, the Washington Redskins. I'm sorry, Washington Commanders. Freudian slip there. So the Washington Commanders here at pick number 29, I really think they need pass rush help. I really think James Pierce Jr. is the guy that can bring it. Now, I really would not be shocked if they took TreVeyon Henderson, the running back out of Ohio State, there with that pick. But when you watch Washington play last year, they just need a pass rush. Like, that's the one thing that they're missing. From a team that made it to the conference championship game last year, like, they really could use a pass rush. Their pass defense, I think, could be helped more by a pass rush as opposed to getting another cornerback. So I think James Pierce Jr., the best pass rusher available out of Tennessee there at pick number 29. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that leaves Buffalo here at pick number 30. Buffalo, to me, is a team that could really use a cornerback. That, to me, is where I think their number one issue or number one area of need would be. And so this is another situation kind of like what we saw with the Minnesota Vikings, what we talked about earlier. There's a lot of different cornerbacks that are available in this draft. I think Troy Amos out of Ole Miss will be a guy that could come in and help. And to me, he would be the most natural pick there. Now, pick number 31, the Kansas City Chiefs need to get better on the offensive line. We saw it in the Super Bowl, right? They simply could not hang with the Philadelphia Eagles defensively because of what they had on the line, right? So I'm going to have them taking Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. He's listed as a tackle, but he could slide down to guard. Just a guy that they can bring in, start on that offensive line, really help with the one need that they really, really have. Now, that brings us to the Philadelphia Eagles here at pick number 32. So I think the Eagles, when you look at what they need, like, God, they're so good. Their roster's so good. There's no positions of need that they really, really have. Like, nothing that's like super pressing. I think they could go with an offensive tackle because Lane Johnson isn't going to play forever. Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon would make a lot of sense. If they wanted to get an extra defensive lineman, Derek Harmon out of Oregon would make a lot of sense, both of whom I have falling to this spot. Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, another one that can be added to the defensive line that would make a lot of sense. But I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. Actually, no. I really wanted to go with Emeka Egbuka here because I am a big fan of Emeka Egbuka. I think he would come in and instantly be a good wide receiver 3, a good slot for Philly. But I'm not going to do it. I'm gonna give them Derek Harmon out of Oregon, defensive tackle, can come in and help right away. All right, so that is what we got for our first round mock draft. And as soon as it loads here, we'll have the full results. But yeah, that's what we got. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. I do feel kind of bad about Emeka Egbuka falling out of the first round because I really do think he's like a really good receiver. And I do think he's the type of player that coaches are going to want in their system. But it just when you're sitting there on the clock picking, like none of these teams near the end of the draft, like none of them is like receivers their most pressing need, in my opinion. I think you can make the argument for the Bills. I think you can make the argument for the Lions. I think you can make the argument for the Rams. You can make the argument for the Texans, but it just seemed like none of them really like pressing needed a wide receiver. And I also think Luther Burden III is another guy that like super talented receiver. He's got a little bit of a diva reputation. I don't think any of those guys or any of those teams near the end of the draft, I just don't think that's at the top of their most pressing needs. But all right, y'all, that is going to do it for our first round mock draft 2025. So in case you cannot tell, I'm very much looking forward to watching this draft Thursday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. The draft really does start at 4 this year. I really do think those top 3 picks are going to be locked in, and I do think it's going to be super interesting to see what happens at 4 and beyond. Like I said, a lot of people think it's going to be Will Campbell with the Patriots at 4. Would I be shocked if that was the case? No, but I'm giving you a little bit of my insight. I'm trying to be a little bit different. Like I said, I think that it's a little bit concerning how much consensus there is in this draft past pick 4 when this is going to be probably one of the crazier and more flatter drafts that we've seen in recent years. So anyway, that's all we got, y'all. If you're looking to do any kind of draft prop betting, you can kind of go based off of the list that we accumulated there for, for the whole draft. And yeah, that's going to do it. If you want more from me, remember, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. That way you can be with us for all the rest of our best ball and NFL content throughout the season, as well as all of our college football content as well. Because let's be honest, all this NFL draft talk is rooted in college football knowledge. So make sure you're subscribed, that you can be with us for that during the season. And like I said, if you're looking to make any draft props, there's the board right there. That's going to be what I'm going with. The ones I really like really like the first 3 picks. I really like Jalen Walker going to Carolina, and I really like there only being 2 quarterbacks taken in the first round. That's just kind of how I see it going forward. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Let's have fun with this. Let's have fun watching the draft. Best of luck to you guys on your prop bets. And really, best of luck to your team as well, because let's be honest, the NFL draft, more so than anything in sports, is the biggest trafficker of hope, right? No matter how bad your team is, no matter what your situation is, the NFL draft is a night where your team can see a guy, hold the jersey, talk to Goodell, the guys on the TV hype him up, and you can be sold that he's going to help your franchise. He's going to be a Pro Bowl player. He's going to be the guy that can help your team win a Lombardi trophy. And that's what's the best part about the draft is for one night, everybody has a little bit of hope. And so I really am looking forward to it. Like I said, best of luck to you guys with your prop bets. Best of luck to you guys as teams with the draft. Hopefully we'll be back next week to analyze the draft and what happened. But thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you guys next time.